This is Life Path Leadership Academy, equipping leaders for transformation. You can picture your future leadership by taking the transformation course with us. Our first certification program is the basic certification program that takes you through the 7 levels of leadership. But today we'll be talking about the advanced certification program that takes you through the transformation series by exploring the book Transformed Leader. Transformed Leader is all about helping you think, feel, and choose effectively as a leader. The first topic we'll be addressing is a leader's composition. We'll be talking about the crisis of identity, the composition of a leader. As humans, we are made up of the outward man and the inward man. Understanding the composition of the inward man helps us to be able to think, feel, and choose effectively as leaders, because leadership does not begin with lording over people, but leading over yourself. We'll look at the inward man, which consists of the human spirit and the soul. We'll also be looking at the composition of the soul. We'll talk about the intellect, the will, and the emotions. Finally, we'll be looking at the interrelationship between the human spirit and the soul. Next, we'll be taking a look at identity and leadership. The soul of leadership is the leadership of the soul, as leadership does not begin with people, but begins with leading yourself. We'll also look at identity discovery and why identity is foundational to leadership. We'll be looking at self-discovery and its connection with identity. We'll talk about identity formation and relationships. How relationships influence our identity formation. We'll look at the necessity of social identity and the place of social rules in the process of identity discovery and formation. We'll look at the mentality that is needed for having a personal identity that is not defined by your position, your roles, or your status, but defined by who you are. Finally, we'll be looking at the connection between identity and team building. How does identity help you to connect with a team, to cooperate and collaborate effectively with other team members? Next, we'll be looking at self-awareness and transformation, the power of the soul. Transformation requires self-awareness, and without an awareness of who you are, the transformation process cannot commence. We'll be taking a look at the spectrum of awareness. Finally, we'll look at the techniques for developing self-awareness. Next, we'll look at true leadership. What is true leadership? Leadership is not the science, a technique, or method. Leadership begins with the leadership spirit. So we'll be talking about the leadership spirit and the dynamics of the leadership spirit. We'll talk about how to follow the leading of love, because you can't be a leader if you don't love people. We'll look at the characteristics of the leadership spirit, the 7 dimensions in which we are led from within by the leadership spirit. We'll look at the importance of obedience and response to the leading of the spirit within. We'll look at how to imbibe the attitude of leadership. We'll also talk about the facts on attitude of leadership. Finally, we'll talk about the purpose of the leadership spirit. Think, feel, and choose a unique leading. We'll be taking a look at the composition of the soul, which is the mind, the will, and the emotions, which is our thinking, our doing, and our feeling faculties. We'll look at the intellect and cognition. We'll talk about ideas, concepts, ideology, and philosophy. How do we form our philosophies? How do we develop our concept? We'll look at the connection between subconscious mind and metacognition. We'll diagnose different worldviews. We'll also look at convictions. We'll talk about the will and the emotions. We'll look at identity in social contexts. We'll also talk about identity and interdependence. Finally, we'll talk about identity and the need for transformation. Leadership and motivation. Leadership is soul leadership. The soul is the goal in leadership. That's why we'll talk about the soul of the family, the soul of the society, the soul of the nation. Humans, the human soul is what makes society, and there is no leadership without taking into consideration the value of souls. The soul is the goal in leadership. So we'll look at transformation. How can the soul experience transformation? By the leading of the spirit, by the leadership spirit. We'll also talk about the different competencies in leadership, commitment. We'll also look at the different skills that are needed for effective leadership: critical thinking skills, emotional intelligence, and decision making skills. Finally, we'll be asking the question, or addressing the question, are leaders born or made? Leadership and character is what we'll be looking at. Leadership is both creation and formation. We'll be looking at how a leader forms or develops character and the connection between having the right character values and leadership. We'll take an overview of the different character traits by looking at the 7 dimensions of the leadership spirit, which is wisdom, understanding, counsel, power, knowledge, reverence, and obedience. We'll also be looking at natural and spiritual leadership and comparing and contrasting both forms of leadership. Finally, we'll take a reflection or answer reflection questions that helps us in our journey to personal leadership. Finally, under the book The Transformed Leader, we'll be looking at the leader's garment. Why the garment of a leader? What are the factors influencing leadership garment? What is the connection between the garment of a leader, the garment of the soul of a leader, and his leadership style? We'll be looking at how to process soul leadership. We'll also be talking about the 3 levels of soul leaders: the family leaders, the organizational leaders, and the national leaders. We'll talk about the greatest law of leadership. Finally, we'll talk about how to lead in love. This is going to be the topics we'll be addressing under the Transformed Leader, which is our advanced certification program. So I will encourage you to sign up at Life Path Leadership Academy. You could also take a look at our leadership and transformation series, which are the 7 levels of transformation leadership, maximizing your potential for transformation, and the book we've just discussed, which is Transformed Leader. Think, feel, and choose as a leader. You are onto Life Path Leadership Academy, equipping leaders for transformation.